In the background is Alabama's Capitol building here in Montgomery. It stands today much the same as it stood a century ago during the great conflict between the South and the North. I'm Bill Henry, WSFA TV News Director. During the centennial here in the state capitol to commemorate the Civil War, or as some prefer to call it, the war between the states, we attempted to capture the significance and the atmosphere of this occasion. We hope that our efforts were successful.
This is Montgomery, Alabama, capital city on the go. The year, 1961, the fast-moving space age. The jet-propelled 60s find Montgomery with an eye toward the future. Construction activity points up the efforts to ease the city's growing pains and to accommodate expanding populace and economy. A century has passed since Montgomery played a vital role in the historic events that surround the tragic conflict between the South and the North. Although the community footsteps are directed along the pathway of the future, Montgomery lives with a proud heritage and many tangible ties with a courageous past. The city proudly retains the title Cradle of the Confederacy, an inheritance of the years that placed Montgomery in the role of capital of the newly born Confederate States of America. The eye does not have far to wander in order to detect a present-day reminder of bygone years. The pressing needs of the present and the future do not necessarily exclude a respectful bond with the past. The inception of the Civil War centennial commemoration gave modern-day residents of the Cradle of the Confederacy a welcomed opportunity to re-examine the events of yesteryear. To add atmosphere and realism to the occasion, area residents in many instances resorted to the costumes and customs of the times. For the ladies, this meant recreating the colorful dress of a century gone by, complete with hoop skirts and bonnets. For the male contingent, the full-grown beards that serve as a trademark for the period of history being reconstructed. Nor did the adults have a monopoly. The children also joined in the spirit of the centennial observance. But the commemoration program was not all bonnets and beards. There was much serious planning and hard work to be done. The Civil War Centennial Committee, headed by James Pruitt, held many preliminary sessions before the highlights of Centennial Week became a reality. However, the organization and the guidance provided by representative citizens was reflected in the success of the commemoration schedule. A week-long feature was the historic pageant, The Man and the Hour. The Man and the Hour, staged at the State Coliseum, was centered around the events leading to the secession of Alabama from the Union and the inauguration of Jefferson Davis as President of the Confederacy. The spectacle and the pageantry of the Centennial Week presentation won widespread acclaim from all attending. The pageant depicted events leading up to the Alabama Secession Convention, the secession announcement, and the first Confederate flag raising.
B. Moore, Governor of the State of Alabama, by virtue of the power vested in me by the foregoing resolutions, do hereby proclaim and make known to the people of Alabama that the contingency contemplated has happened in the election of Abraham Lincoln to the presidency of the United States. The voters are hereby called upon to assemble at the several places of voting to elect delegates to a convention of the State of Alabama on Monday, the 7th day of January, 1861, to consider, determine, and do whatever in the opinion of said convention the rights and interests of Alabama requires to be done for their protection. Looks like something's happened. Let's move in a mite closer.
And something did happen. Decisions had been made, and to a vote of 61 to 39, Alabama seceded. Alabama seceded! Whereas the election of Abraham Lincoln and Hannibal Hamlin to the offices of President and Vice President of the United States of America, a sectional party avowedly hostile to the domestic institution and to the peace and security of the people of the state of Alabama, preceded by many and dangerous infractions of the Constitution of the United States by many of the states and the people of the North section, is a political wrong of so insulting and menacing character as to justify the people of the state of Alabama in the adoption of prompt and decided measures for their future peace and security. Therefore be it declared and ordained by the people of the state of Alabama in convention assembled that the state of Alabama now withdraws and is hereby withdrawn from the Union known as the United States, and henceforth ceases to be one of the said United States, and is of right to be a sovereign and independent state. Mississippi had seceded only 2 days before, and Florida a day after, and now Alabama. Georgia and Louisiana, in a matter of days, became a part of the secession picture. At the suggestion of South Carolina, representatives of 6 states and at the invitation of Alabama decided to meet February 4th in Montgomery to organize a new confederation. Our town was destined to play the role as the cradle of the Confederacy. Montgomery was to be the focal point which destiny had decreed a new government would be born. New leaders would arrive, and a way of life preserved for future centuries. With secession, many thought of new hopes, new horizons, but the measuring sands of time would forecast otherwise, as future pages of history would reveal.
Spectators are gathered to see the first Confederate flag wave over the Capitol the very next day.
As the cannons boomed, the flag was raised by Miss Letitia Tyler, who was the daughter of Colonel Robert Tyler and granddaughter of John Tyler, former President of the United States. Miss Tyler was visiting a family near Montgomery at the time.
The pageant portrayed the gay and the grim, the light-hearted pre-war festivity of the traditional cotillion, and a terrifying glimpse into the immediate future of that era in history. For a brief moment, the face of the Confederate fighting man seemed to come into dramatic focus, only to blur again and fade into the courageous chapter in the history of our nation. For many, the history relived in the pageantry of the man in the hour gave new meaning and significance to the historical points of interest in and about Montgomery. Visitors and residents alike took a closer look at the Capitol and its environs. Alabama's Capitol building, unique, for within its walls was born a nation. This is the way the original structure looked. No dome, no north or south wings, and without the beautiful Corinthian columns. It burned in 1849. Today, the new Capitol, completed in 1851, stands on the foundations of the old, housing modern government machinery, but with a very strong bond to the past. The giant rotunda is capped by a 97-foot dome. It's been described as particularly pure and beautiful in design. Perhaps the most striking feature in the Capitol is the 3-story, self-supporting double stairway. A northern architect, moved by the sweeping, unhampered lines, had this to say: "They are a marvelous creation, unsurpassed throughout the North American continent. They are beautiful in architectural detail, of general excellence in proportion, a monument to the mind that conceived it and to the land that built it, an inspiration to the student, and a joy and delight to all who appreciate the beautiful." On the second floor of the building beats the very heart of the state of Alabama. Occupied by the House of Representatives and the Senate chamber, here is found representative government in its purest form. It was here that the Alabama Secession Convention was held in January of 1861. It was a time of tremendous excitement. State after state was seceding. From this chair in the House, a young man, William L. Yancey, holding the crowd with fiery oratory, presented his famous Alabama platform. It was a sweeping conviction for states' rights. It was adopted word for word. Less than a month later, other southern states began sending delegates to Montgomery to form a new Confederacy. On February 4th of 1861, these delegates organized to form the Confederate States of America, and a new nation was born. This document constituted the most awful challenge ever to the government of the United States, a challenge that required 4 years of carnage to settle. Then, 2 weeks later, Montgomery's 10,000 population was swelled by the hundreds for the inauguration of Jefferson Davis as President of the Confederacy. Today, a brass star stands on the porch marking the exact spot where Davis stood to receive his oath of office. Mississippian Jefferson Davis, a stirring, dedicated man, became the father of a new country. In turn, he gave the city the name Cradle of the Confederacy. Many of these historic events are recorded in the Mackenzie murals located on the 3rd floor of the Capitol. Mackenzie completed his work in the late 1900s under Governor Bibb Graves. So there's Alabama's capital, more than a state house, rather a monument to the strength of a nation and to the free thinking men who make up that nation. Capitol Hill was deeded to the state in the early 1800s by the town of New Philadelphia, one of Montgomery's ancestors. The founder of New Philadelphia, and the man for whom Dexter Avenue is named, Andrew Dexter, predicted that one day the town he founded would become the capital of the state. So he set aside the present site for the Capitol building. A 19th century cannon rests quietly on the grounds in its stone carriage, the muzzle still yawning. It's a monument now and rich in history. It was sent to Montgomery at the outbreak of the Civil War from an old fort at Pensacola. Nearby, a flagpole stands, much more solidly now than earlier. It was taken from a Spanish ship sunk during the Battle of Santiago. Other statues occupy the front lawn, that of John Allen Wyeth, Alabama doctor and founder of the New York Polyclinic Medical School and Hospital. John Marion Sims, founder of the Women's Hospital in New York City and the first such hospital ever in the nation in Montgomery. The clock, which mounts the top of the Capitol, can accurately be described as very old. It's been mounted in its present position since 1852. Before that, it had served as the Montgomery town clock for many years. Some of the official state travel folders beg pardon for its sometime misinformation, citing the above given reason. Rising in front of the Capitol's north entrance is a 70-foot high shaft, a memorial to the Confederate dead. On April 27, 1886, long years after the conflict had been decided, Jefferson Davis returned to Montgomery and laid the cornerstone of this historic monument. All branches are represented, the artillery, the navy, the cavalry, and the infantry of the Confederacy. When this historic shaft shall crumbling lie in ages hence, in woman's heart will be a folded flag, a thrilling page unrolled, a deathless song of Southern chivalry. Jefferson Davis, who said, "I was inaugurated on Monday. The audience was large and brilliant. I thought it would have gratified you to have witnessed it and have been a memory to our children. As soon as an hour is my own, I shall look for a house and write you more fully." Thus did Jefferson Davis write to his wife on his own inauguration as the first president of the Confederacy, and of his intentions of finding a home for her and the children, a home destined to become the first White House of the Confederacy. This is the house, built by William Sayre about 1825 on the corner of Lee and Bibb Streets, then a fashionable residential section of Montgomery. When she arrived in Montgomery, Mrs. Davis said of it, "It's a gentleman's residence, roomy enough for our purpose." Its spacious rooms and high ceilings echoed a mixture of events from intimate Davis family discussions to historic decisions involving the infant republic. Many of the important conferences took place here, in this study. And here, the table on which Davis wrote his famous Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government. In this same room is the chair used by Davis in the Senate chamber of the Capitol. In the second floor parlor is a portrait of one of the three children of President and Mrs. Davis who lived to maturity, Winnie Davis, known affectionately as the first daughter of the Confederacy. The chair sent to Davis while in Fort Monroe after the war awaiting trial, a trial that was never held. The chair was sent after a court fight lasting 2 years. Other articles figured prominently in Davis' life are also displayed. One, a tobacco pipe, was finally sent to him after the prison doctor forced authorities to allow Davis to smoke. Jeff Davis' bedroom provides a concentration of articles used during his lifetime. His bed, an exquisite example of antebellum furnishings. Personal swords, one used during the Mexican War. His valise, embossed with his name and carried during the entire 4-year conflict. His chair and bedroom slippers. Before her death in 1906, Mrs. Davis drew a diagram of the room as it was when her husband used it, and the furniture is arranged accordingly. Upstairs is located the one object that always draws acclaim from visitors, the Davis baby bed. Fully 6 feet tall from its casters to the top of the canopy, its equal is not to be found. A tour of the building is sufficient to steep one in a past that is still fresh in the minds of many, that could even be called recent in time as man's history is reckoned, slightly more than 100 years. Today, the everyday of the past is to be seen and revered, for today the yesterdays are reverent. It is perhaps the most important link to the past located in Montgomery today. To add dimension to the historical reminders that abound in Montgomery, the Centennial Week program included reenactment of the inauguration of Jefferson Davis. History was followed to the letter, even to the arrival the evening before the actual swearing-in ceremonies. At 10 o'clock at night, a special train arrived at Union Station from West Point, Georgia, bearing the President-elect of the Confederate States of America, Mississippian and U.S. General Jefferson Davis. He was portrayed by Montgomery attorney T.B. Hill. He was met by a cheering throng of latter-day rebels and an official Confederate Congress delegation composed, among others, of 1861 Mayor Andrew Jefferson Noble, that's Mayor Earl James, famous rebel orator William Lowndes Yancey, portrayed by Supreme Court Justice John L. Goodwin, and Judge H.W. Watson in the form of Montgomery businessman Carl Baer. From the station, General Davis led a torchlight parade to the Exchange Hotel off Confederate Square, the same spot which the 19th century Davis greeted the crowds come to welcome him as their leader to the capital of the Confederacy. In this setting, William Yancey once again praised the new nation's leader, saying, "The man and the hour have met." Saturday, cloudy skies and eventual pouring rain threatened to disrupt the historic reenactments, but the large crowds were evidence of the enthusiasm. For the important moment, Jefferson Davis inauguration. First, the parade from the fountain at Confederate Square up Dexter Avenue to the Alabama Capitol. A minstrel band, authentically dressed soldiers, colorful costumes, horses, buggies, and a lot of proud faces. As the band played Dixie, Confederate officials, including Governor John Patterson as Governor A.B. Moore, and then General Davis, made their way through the crowd up to the Capitol steps. The President-elect was introduced to the people by Alabama Supreme Court Justice Ed Livingston, acting as his Confederate counterpart, S.C. Bullock.
Distinguished guests and fellow citizens, it is my unique pleasure at this time to introduce the President-elect of the Confederacy, Honorable Jefferson Davis.
gentlemen of the Congress of the Confederate States, friends and fellow citizens, called to the difficult and responsible station of Chief Executive of the provisional government which you have instituted, I approach the discharge of the duties assigned to me with an humble distrust of my abilities, but with a sustaining confidence in the wisdom of those who are to guide and aid me in the administration of public affairs, and an abiding faith in the virtue and patriotism of our people. Looking forward to the speedy establishment of a permanent government to take the place of this, and which by its greater moral and physical power will be better able to combat the many difficulties which arise from the conflicting interests of separate nations, I enter upon the duties of the office for which I have been chosen with the hope that the beginning of our career as a confederacy may not be obstructed by hostile opposition to our enjoyment of the separate existence and independence which we have asserted and which, with the blessing of Providence, we intend to maintain.
After a stirring speech, Jefferson Davis accepted the trials of requested leadership for the years ahead, and no one could have begun to conceive how serious, hard, and tragic those years were to be. Despite a driving rain that dampened everything but the spirit and enthusiasm of the occasion, a large-scale parade followed the inaugural reenactment. The modern-day procession was a blending of the past and the present. Then, following the parade and as night fell, a gigantic commemoration ball at the Coliseum climaxed the week-long centennial celebration. Alabama's governor and Mrs. John Patterson led an impressive guest list that boasted many visiting dignitaries, including the governors of Virginia and Mississippi. The antebellum theme was carried through in authentic dress of the time being commemorated. Many present-day residents of Montgomery are direct descendants of those who peopled the young capital of the Confederacy in the days being commemorated through the Civil War Centennial observance. But to all, the events of the Centennial Week program brought a new understanding of the times and trials of a century ago. Southerners have always taken a personal pride in this unique region in which they live, its history, its tradition. There's a family-like tie with the land that makes the Southerner swell with pride when he hears the strains of Dixie, bristle with personal indignation when the South is maligned. There's an old saying, you can get the Southerner out of the South, but you can't get the South out of the Southerner. The march of time and progress has moved with ever-increasing acceleration since those war years of a century ago. Many changes have been wrought, social, economic, and political, in a growing nation. The reverberations of a complex society are felt in many different ways. But the individualistic spirit that has always been the Southland is still a strong link in the American chain. And there's still an inner thrill that cannot be duplicated when the Southerner sings, "In Dixieland, where I was born in, early on one frosty morning, look away, look away, look away, Dixieland."
This program was videotaped earlier for presentation at this time.